So we complain about franchises not taking risks and making bold swings. I'm looking at you, Scream. So then we finally get that with this movie, but then it breaks our hearts, and we don't like what they did at the end, because I'm not going to spoil right now, but this will be a spoiler review. But we're going to dive deep into I Know What You Did Last Summer and why I think it actually is a pretty decent slasher requel. So anyway, it's I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025, all the spoilers.
Please stop.
What's up, guys? Welcome to and all the spoilers for I Know What You Did Last Summer. And first off, I just want to say I love being a part of the horror community. I think it's so cool. Even if we don't agree on every horror movie that comes out, I just love when we get a big franchise like this coming out and everybody's so excited. Even if they see the chatter already that the movie might not be that good, you still see people standing in front of the poster at the movie theater because it's a big franchise horror movie, and we're all usually there opening weekend. And some of us know that we're going to go into this movie probably not liking it, but we're still excited just because we're a family. And that's what's so cool about being a part of the horror community, is we all are there to celebrate and rejoice and just be happy that we're getting these movies. And sometimes hating on a movie is just as fun as loving a movie. You know, you see in the forums and the socials, everybody giving their opinion on this movie. A lot of us not liking it and professing that. And then people coming back and saying, well, I did like it, and blah, blah, blah. And so it's just part of the fun. I love our community. I love what we do. I have a blast talking about movies, good and bad. And, this is why we're here, people, right? But I will be doing a ranking of all 4 movies. I'm not going to include the TV series in there just because I don't really remember it. But I did go back and watch the first 2 movies over the past couple of days just to give them a fresh study up and to kind of compare them to this new movie, because I thought, by the way, again, this isn't all the spoilers, all right? So if you don't want to know what happens at the end of this movie, then you might not want to watch this, because it's a big freaking spoiler. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One reason I wanted to watch those first 2 movies was to study the character of Ray, and maybe there would be some hints, some little morsels that might lead up to him actually being the killer in this movie. And I think we all, with the last 2 Scream movies, we're always complaining that they're not making big swings, taking risks, bringing Stu back. There's your elephant in the room. And I'm one of those guys. I complain about it all the time. And I think a big complaint is not necessarily making a legacy character the killer, but I guess changing it up from the Scooby-Doo-like endings that we constantly get with the Scream movies, and how ridiculous it can get, especially with Scream 6. Not just in the reveal, but also in some of the kills. And this movie is definitely guilty of some of that here as well. They even make fun of the Scooby-Doo aspect of these movies. And also, there were some people in my comments stating that, and I'm paraphrasing, but to compare this with Scream 5 and 6 and say that this is better than Scream 5 and 6 is nonsense, because those movies are, I guess, directed so much better. I highly disagree. I'm sorry. I just do. I don't think the Scream movies after, say, Part 2 are anything special in terms of direction, storytelling especially. And don't get me wrong, I have fun with the Scream movies, even 5 and 6 to some degree. But to say that there's some sort of like horror royalty is just complete and utter bullshit. I think the I Know movies are pretty much at the same level quality-wise as the at least later Scream movies, for sure. And to say that 5 and 6 are sort of like hollowed ground, bullshit. They're not. It's not. I think those movies have major problems. I think even bigger than this new I Know What You Did movie. But that's just my opinion, okay? And I know a lot of you guys are going to think that Scream 5 and 6 are better than this movie. And you know what? Maybe I'll do some sort of ranking. Maybe I'll do it with the Hit the Bricks boys of, like, you know, Urban Legend and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream, maybe putting all those together and just kind of ranking them. But I would have to go back and rewatch the Urban Legends. I don't think I've seen all of the Urban Legends. So anyway, yeah, let's dive into this spoiler review. I will say I really liked Danica and Ava. Danica, this story sort of centers around her just because she's having this wedding. She's the first person to get the letter in the mail, basically as a wedding gift, and that's where we see the I Know What You Did Last Summer. Backing up, this guy Sam Cooper had this accident and his truck goes over this cliff. And thinking back to the original movie, they actually hit the person that starts the whole thing, which ends up being Ben Willis. So I think the stakes were higher for sure in the first movie, whereas I think this was the situation where they could have just walked away from it, called the cops, and called it a day. And I think they honestly would have been fine. But again, like I said in my spoiler-free review, I understand how young, you know, late teens would probably react to that, and maybe they would overreact. And, you know, this is my whole life is ahead of me. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to have a ding on my record that's going to destroy my future. So there's enough there to buy that they would react the way they did. But I like that, you know, Danica and Ava were kind of on equal ground character-wise, and you didn't really know which one of them kind of outranked the other one. So they both could have been like, you know, final girls, which one of them does get attacked on the boat in the final act, and we think she dies, but then she is able to come back at the end of the movie. I think that was Danica, right? And I think it was Ava that is sort of propped up to be the final girl. But they do both ultimately end up living. Outside of them, though, I actually did like a couple of the other characters, too. Teddy was an interesting character. I didn't talk about any of the other characters outside of the two main leads, just because I wanted to save them for the spoiler stuff. But Teddy was an interesting and fun character. He sounded exactly like Channing Tatum. But he was, you know, the rich guy. His dad was going to pretty much cover everything up, which sort of set up that maybe his dad could have been a red herring. Who knows? But he was a funny character as well. I liked his sense of humor. And, you know, you kind of bought his reactions to certain things that were going on in the movie. Like, I'm done with this shit. I'm moving on with my life. But then the killings start happening, and he's kind of forced to jump in there. But Danica was originally dating him, but then that kind of fell apart after the tragedy that opens up the movie. And so she ends up dating this guy named Wyatt, who happens to be the first major kill in the movie, the kill that they use in the trailer with the hook going through his back. And I think that was a pretty effective freaking kill. It definitely had those Scream opening vibes for sure. Now, I think Stevie was the most interesting character, and I think they set her up immediately to be sort of removed from the rest of the cast. She ends up being a part of the group that has the big accident at the beginning, reluctantly, you know. And I think the big thing with her, sort of like Ray in the first movie, was that she didn't come from a rich family. She was on the poorer side of things, you know. And so she always felt kind of like the outcast. Again, much like Ray did at the beginning. We're going to be bringing that back around near the end of the movie, because I think this movie did have a really good motive for Ray being the killer. But she definitely was a big question mark. And I think if you had to point the finger at anybody, it was definitely her. And I do think that at this point in the franchise, a female killer makes sense because they hadn't done it in the past. And I got to give major credit to Barry from Wolfman's Got Nards, because I think he actually called that, you know, back in the promotional circuit for this movie. And I'll admit, I was kind of hoping that there would be a female killer this time. I didn't think Ben Willis was going to be the killer, because that was almost 30 years ago. And, of course, Ben Willis, he was set up to die in I Still Know What You Last Summer, but then they put that stinger at the end of the movie where he's under the bed and he drags Julie under. Is that scene like retconned? Who knows? They never even mention it in this movie. But there were quite a few young characters that I really dug in this movie. I do think this is definitely not the worst of the bunch. And if I did like a REQUEL ranking, I think this would be at least like top 3. And I know that's not saying much, because how many REQUELs are there? I know there's one for Texas, and I know there's one for this and Halloween. Scream has a REQUEL vibe, even though it's not technically a REQUEL, but you could say Scream 5 could maybe fit in that category. But I would definitely put this above a few of those, for sure. It was fun. I am a casual fan of this franchise. I have a blast when I watch these movies, but then I always kind of forget about them because nobody's ever talking about them. Everybody talks about Scream. Everybody talks about Halloween. And yeah, it's just, it is what it is. For some reason, this franchise did not catch on to like the cultural zeitgeist like Scream did. You know, I think Ghostface is just a much more unique and fun character than the fisherman. But that's not to take anything away from the fisherman. I do love the fisherman. And to be fair, yeah, he uses a hook, but Ghostface uses a knife like 90% of the time. So it's not like Scream is known for the kills. But I do think Scream is known for more like wittier dialogue. And this isn't that. This franchise is not about wittier dialogue. It's more about mystery and suspense, you know, and it's got heavy thriller vibes. And I like that. I like that this didn't fully like copy Scream. I think I Know gets sort of a bad rap, honestly. Just the fact that it came out, and I think it got greenlit because Scream was such a big hit. But if you really compare the first I Know and the first Scream, they're very different movies, honestly. Before we talk about Ray and the reveal and all that, let's talk about Julie James real quick because we haven't. I think Julie James might be my biggest con of this movie. Not that I didn't like her, but I wanted more from her for sure. She didn't really get to do much in terms of like, you know, kicking ass and taking down the killer. And whatnot. She was just sort of kind of in the background. She does show up at the end to confront Ray, you know, and that is an important scene. And she does have a funny moment where, you know, they're like, fuck July 4th. But outside of that, she doesn't really get to kick major ass like, say, Danica and Ava do. Ultimately, it was Ava that was with Julie at the end of the movie when they have the big showdown with Ray, which I guess is a good transition. Now we can jump into Ray and that whole motivation. And this was the biggest complaint. I know a lot of people were downright pissed with this ending, and I think that's just because everybody loves Ray as a character, but they love Freddie Prinze Jr. Let's be honest, okay? Freddie Prinze Jr. is an extremely charismatic actor. People love the guy. And the idea of him being the killer when he is just very wholesome in like the first couple of movies and heroic. I mean, the second movie, he spends the whole time trying to get to Julie to save her. So I get that people don't like the guy, but let's really break apart the psychology of this, okay, people? It's all there. I know a lot of you say that they didn't give you enough for his motivation, and maybe you're right as far as like maybe giving you some scenes, maybe showing you some flashbacks that led up to it, but it's all there from the beginning. He is the outcast in the very beginning of the movie, much like Stevie is in this movie. Stevie is the female Ray. So there's a pivotal scene in this movie with the town, and they're having like this town meeting, and then Ray shows up and he states that Southport is screwing up big time. They're trying to sweep this whole thing under the rug because they're trying to make money because it's a tourist type thing. You can compare this to Jaws and Mayor Vaughn. They're doing the same thing. And everybody's in on it. They don't want to bring up the past and talk about what happened 30 years ago. And Ray, you know, his whole life, he has been just completely fed up. Plus, he had all that trauma from the events of the first two movies. And there's a scene in the movie where Julie states that people deal with trauma in different ways. And Julie dealt with it a completely different way than Ray did. And there's clues there too because they got a divorce. They don't go into why they got a divorce, but you can tell that she's very angry with Ray. So I think Julie saw the signs, and I think she knew when she has that big reveal at the end of the movie and she realizes that it's Ray. And so then she goes to confront him. And I loved that. And I think, guys, if you really had a problem with this movie and you haven't watched the first two in a while, especially the first one, I'd say go back and give the first one a fresh watch and really pay attention to Ray in that movie because I think it all kind of adds up to what happens in this movie. And I am so glad that we didn't get another cliche movie with a reveal that's pretty much forgotten in 2 weeks. I think Ray helps prop up Stevie. I think if you didn't have Ray and if it was just Stevie as the killer, then it would be completely forgettable. But when you throw in a killer like Ray, it's going to be extremely memorable, whether you like it or not. You know, I think disliking this movie is going to make it as memorable as liking the movie. Now, guys, I'm not saying that this movie's perfect. I don't think it's the best slasher, but I am a massive slasher fan, and I don't ask for much with these movies. I think there's a cool backstory with this franchise. And so I did go in with low expectations, and I came out quite happy with the movie. And I'm kind of itching to watch it again, if I'm being honest. Is it like the best movie of the year? Absolutely not. Far from it. Probably somewhere in the middle. My rating for this movie still stands at, like, I'd say like a low purchase worthy. I think that's what I gave it in the spoiler-free review. But I love the scene at the very end when we get to see Brandy. And we all know that Brandy was actually lobbying to get a role in this movie. So I don't know if maybe that had something to do with that stinger scene at the very end or what, but it was a fun, nice little scene. And you know, when she says, who do we got to go fuck up now? You know, the crowd was just cheering. I think if you're a fan of this franchise, then you were just eating that stuff up. So yeah, guys, that's my spoiler review for I Know What You Did Last Summer. I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comments. I'm curious to see what the box office is going to be for this movie. Is it going to be a hit? We shall see. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. Rudy Few for Fridays. Follow my Drumdums on my socials. Support me on Patreon. Become a channel member. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a day. Drumdum out.